Thanks again for joining us this afternoon. My name is Liz Schaller. I'm the NIMAC director, joined today by our expert Braille transcriber, Stacy Fontenot, who's been presenting our Duxbury NIMAS textbook transcription series, as well as Nicole Gaines, our NIMAC project director. She's here to talk about eBraille. So happy to have them with us today. Before we get started, I want to go ahead and find out who's in the room with us today. So if you can let us know which option best describes your role. Are you a NIMAC authorized user or state coordinator? A NIMAC accessible media producer? A Braille transcriber not registered with NIMAC? A TVI or paraprofessional or other? And if you do put other, please let us know in the chat what best describes your role. Okay, I'll go ahead and end the poll, share the results. So, similar to our previous sessions, looks like about half of the folks here are registered with the NIMAC already, and then the other half we have Braille transcribers and TVIs not currently registered with the NIMAC. So, thank you all for joining us today. We're so glad to have you. So today, is going to be kind of a recap of our whole series. In our last session, we focused on math. In particular, learned how to take a look at the NIMAS XML file and verify whether or not it contains MathML. We learned about the DBT template, how to use that for your project. We learned what math-related styles are in the DBT template. And then we also learned what types of content may not be tagged math in a NIMAS file that contains MathML. So last week was a little intimidating for me, but I definitely learned a lot. It was so interesting, and we're really glad to have Stacy with us because she speaks math so well. Today, our focus during the slide portion of the presentation is going to primarily be on eBraille, as well as some other resources that are available to you from the NIMAC that you may not be familiar with. So our learning objectives today are to understand the components of an eBraille file, to understand the timeline for eBraille production, as well as to learn about creating large print and EPUB from NIMAS. So in today's agenda, we're going to, like I mentioned, have an overview of the eBraille file format. We're also going to, Nicole's going to tell you a little bit more about producing and reading eBraille and kind of some of the timelines on those things. And then Stacy has some other resources she's going to share with you before we switch gears to our Q&A kind of interactive discussion portion where we hope you've brought some questions from previous sessions or things that you're interested in knowing more about, maybe suggestions for future trainings even. We would love to hear from you about that. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Nicole to tell you more about eBraille.
Great. Thanks so much, Liz. And first of all, even before we get started with that, I'm just curious if you could put in the chat how many folks have heard of eBraille? If you've heard of eBraille, if you could put that in the chat. So we've got one, got a couple more. Great. One person who's never heard of it. Super, super. Well, I just want to kind of start off by saying that if you're not really familiar with eBraille and not really sure what it's about, you are not behind the times because this is brand new. This is something that is kind of on the cutting edge right now. And one of the things that eBraille is intended to do as a new digital Braille format is to really be a file format for the 21st century. And what I mean by that is to accommodate a new generation of multi-line refreshable Braille devices. If you've heard of the Monarch from APH, that is one. But we anticipate that we will actually be seeing more of these devices hitting the scene in the coming years. And what is really unique and exciting about these new devices is that for the first time, students and adult Braille readers will be able to experience digital books with graphics and text integrated into one file format in the same way that sighted folks have been used to reading ebooks for years, right? So part of the rationale for it is to help provide a more compact alternative to embossed Braille when the digital format is the right format for the student to use. It addresses some limitations of other Braille formats that I'll talk a little bit more about in a few moments. And the ultimate goal, of course, is always to just get more Braille into the hands of readers more quickly. So some advantages of eBraille is that it basically combines the flexibility of ebooks with the precision of Braille rules. So that's really important. It kind of balances those things. It's also reflowable. If you've ever had BRF and had that on a refreshable Braille device, you may have noticed that you can get really big gaps in the text because it's not really a format that's intended to be reflowed. It also offers the same navigation as ebooks, which is an improvement over the navigation that students generally have with their devices. And as I mentioned before, the really big thing is that it integrates graphics into the Braille file format. If we think about next slide, please. If we think about some specifics of BRF versus eBraille, one of the key differences is that instead of using ASCII Braille to capture the Braille content, it uses Unicode. This has the advantage of Unicode is always the same wherever you are. There aren't different flavors of Unicode, so those dots will never change. So that's something that's really valuable. It also uses markup in CSS instead of blank space to indicate the formatting. And this is really what allows us to have that reflowability across devices. It supports internal and external links, which is really exciting. So you could have a student who's reading their Braille book. Hey, there's a hyperlink that goes out to a website. They would be able to click that and using whatever browser is integrated into their device, go out and check out that website. Or if they have an internal link from the index or the table, chapter 3 starts on this page, click on that link and they're taken right to where they want to be. So that's another really nice improvement. We also have metadata. This is kind of more for the librarian types, those that are like all of us from the NIMAC who happen to be on this call. So we just always like to mention the fact that metadata is incorporated into the file, bibliographic metadata as well as metadata about the producer and that kind of format related metadata, which can also be beneficial. And then again, those graphics are actually bundled and zipped together all as one file set for the eBraille rather than being separate and sort of out there in a different place. So I want to take a couple of moments and talk a little bit about what's behind it's a little bit of under the hood if we kind of take eBraille apart. And if you're familiar with HTML, and particularly if you are familiar with EPUB, which is based on HTML, you're already familiar basically with the eBraille format because what we're really talking about is EPUB using Unicode Braille instead of text in between the tags. So the HTML is really what is providing the structure of the eBraille files. That's where that markup is found that identifies this is a paragraph, this is a table, this is a list, so that the device can identify that, apply the right rules, and display that correctly. And as I've already mentioned, it allows us to add those links for the first time, which is really useful for the user. Another important piece to the eBraille format is the CSS file. And again, this is a little bit in the weeds, but the CSS file is really where we've got those banner rules in terms of like, okay, now the HTML is telling you this is a paragraph or a list, but the CSS is telling you, hey, according to our banner rules, this is how you should format that paragraph. This is how you should format that list or that heading. And so this is where we get that, again, that reflowability in terms of that CSS is going to give the right instructions to the device, regardless of what that device is. So it helps ensure that that formatting is consistent across devices. And the other piece of this, which I kind of like to highlight, just because eBraille is an international specification, this is something that was actually worked on by many individuals and companies across the world. And so one of the things that's really nice in terms of sharing Braille is that if you had, just say, for example, you had a Braille book that was produced in Britain according to the British rules for Braille formatting, but you want to use that in the US, that is something that's super easy to do because that Unicode Braille, you don't need to change that. You just need to change those Braille rules. That lives in your CSS. You swap out the CSS, and you've got a book that will accommodate banner rules. So it's really exciting in terms of making it a lot easier to share Braille as well. Another piece of the file format, as I mentioned before, is the metadata. I think can be particularly good for agencies and organizations. In terms of identifying, always being clear about what is this book that I'm looking at, what's the edition, what's the copyright year, and who's the publisher, to always have that located inside the file so that you can be clear on what it is. In that way, it's very similar to NIMAS because in NIMAS, you've always got that OPF so it's very analogous to that in terms of the ability to always know just specifically what is included in that eBraille file. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention with regard to the format is the tactile graphics. That's a really important piece in terms of, for the purposes of the eBraille file, you actually can have a range of tactile graphics formats. Most commonly what we see for tactile graphics today are PDFs. And folks who are more techie might be thinking, but PDF is not an image file format. And you're right, it's its own document format. It is included as something that is valid for tactile graphics for eBraille, simply because it is such a commonly used format for capturing tactile graphics. But other supported image formats are JPEG, PNG, and SVG. The longer term trajectory, at least the ideal, is for eBraille to kind of evolve over time to where we're seeing much more SVG and less PDF. We'll see if that happens. May happen, may not happen, may happen, but not quickly. But the other thing that's nice about eBraille is that it can also contain image descriptions. And actually, the format itself requires image descriptions. So that's kind of a nice aspect in terms of the accessibility feature that's built right into that file format. As I mentioned before, kind of bundling these together in that same zip file together, it makes the files easier to store. The BRFs and the graphics files are not separate things. They are all located together in that same format. So just to give a quick recap, the HTML, that's where your structure comes from. The CSS, that's where you're getting your specific Braille rules applied. The metadata, that's just the information about what is in that book, what is it that you're looking at. And then tactile graphics are tactile graphics. And so together, all of these parts together make eBraille a complete and consistent accessible format for Braille readers. So again, in terms of some of the benefits for eBraille, there are benefits both to users and to organizations. As I mentioned earlier, what we really want from the eBraille specification, it grew out of wanting to really leverage a new generation of multi-line refreshable Braille devices. That was kind of a key motivator. But really what we want to see from this format is we want it to be a very versatile format. And the goal is for it to work on single line displays, multi-line displays, as well as embossers, And I will just say out of the gate, we're not there yet with all of the hardware and software support that we want, but that is something that is ongoing as we kind of build out eBraille and we prepare to really launch it in a bigger way. Navigation, of course, is a major feature, including the tactile graphics is a major feature. The metadata is beneficial both to the end users and also to organizations that are organizing or sharing or creating libraries. And then the other piece of this too is that because we've built the format on EPUB, uh, that is actually kind of future proofing it in terms of we are already poised to be able to evolve as EPUB evolves. And so that's really beneficial because we're not creating a proprietary format. We're not creating a format that is going to sort of lose its relevance as uh, digital publishing evolves, but we're integrated. We're just kind of in at the ground level with mainstream digital publishing, which is really beneficial. And then last, in terms of from the transcriber perspective, particularly, one of the things that's really advantageous, if you've ever been a transcriber who's been in a situation where, uh-oh, there's a problem in this book. I've finished the book, but there's actually a sentence missing or something has to happen and it shifts everything on this page and that actually shifts everything on every page uh, subsequent to that. One of the things that's nice about eBraille is that corrections and new additions are much, much easier to distribute because, making a change in one place, you don't have to necessarily you don't have to make changes throughout in order to accommodate uh, the shifting that would happen in the formatting that might happen if you had a BRF file, for example. So before I start to talk a little bit about producing and reading eBraille, I just wanted to stop for a moment because that was a lot of information. Some of it might have been kind of technical for folks, and wanted to see if there were any questions at this point about what eBraille is and what it's designed to do.
I have
And
a
you're
question
welcome.
for you,
Yeah,
Nicole. This is
sure.
Stacy. You had mentioned that the images could have alt text. Is that metadata associated with the image file itself, or is it integrated into the text or the eBraille?
That is an excellent question. It would actually be integrated as alt text on the image tag in the HTML. So, but what you're pointing to, it's a really it's an interesting question because one of the exciting things that is on the radar and that is under development right now is having the ability on the Monarch as a separate thing to have some annotations that are integrated into PDFs that are read on the Monarch. And so I think what you're pointing to, Stacy, is that there's kind of an interesting question going forward in terms of how would we want to capture that if we wanted detailed annotations inside different parts of a graphic, that could be an option going forward. And how that will sort of dovetail with eBraille, that's kind of an open question at this point. Thanks for asking that. So
And
there, oh, sorry, were you going to
no, I
tell
was
me?
going to read the question in the chat, but if you're
You,
looking at it,
you
great.
may. Okay, well, I'll just read it out. Do we need to know EPUB to work with eBraille? And the answer to that is no. And actually, I'll kind of just give a little, just kind of launch a little bit into the production side, and that at this point, the way that it's really going to have like a minimal impact on transcriber workflows at this point, right? You're basically going to be going through the same steps that you take to create your Braille, and then, like for example, with Duxbury, what they're working on right now is an export to eBraille option. You've done everything that you're going to do. If you want to export that as eBraille, you will have that option uh, when you're ready to do that. But I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Anybody else? Any other questions? Right. So, okay, so getting to the exciting stuff about where are we now, what's been done, what still remains to be done. Producing eBraille is something that has been it's been in development for a while. But not for a super long time because, there was actually the development of the technical specification itself. It actually took quite a bit of time, right? So the actual 1.0 specification, I want to say that it was launched less than a year ago, right? So I believe it was August that that specification was became official. And so, so developers, hardware folks, um, software folks have been kind of working on developing support since that time, right? As I mentioned, Duxbury is working on Save as eBraille. They have a version of the software that's being tested by some folks. We've been trying to get an update from them on when the target release date might be for that. We don't actually have one yet. I would just I don't know. Stacy's more of our, she's kind of our in the know person with Duxbury. I don't know, Stacy, if you would even hazard a guess. 3 months, 6 months, maybe? Maybe by the end of the calendar year. I kind of am like, let's say by the end of the calendar year, and then if it gets here in 2 or 3 months, then we'll all just be really, really excited and happy.
Oh,
But
blow out the
anyway,
candles early.
exactly, exactly. So, and then another, some other software that is in development right now. APH is actually working on a free BRF to eBraille conversion tool. And this is something that, if you had heard about this before, and some of you may actually have this, APH actually posted a version of it a couple of months ago on the APH website for people to download and test. I would just give the caveat that we know that it's not ready for prime time yet, but we are hoping that it will be ready for prime time by October, and maybe September to have what we would consider a production ready release for that. The main reason for that is for APH and other organizations to benefit from the back catalog of Braille that they've already produced, right? You've got your BRFs, you've got your PDF graphics, and you want to turn them into eBraille. And it's a very remarkable tool because it's simple to use. You navigate, this is where my Braille is, this is where my graphics are. You push a button and literally a few seconds later you have your eBraille file. So we're really uh, happy to be able to offer that. And again, working out some of the kinks, but hopefully within the next few months that will be ready. Um, Another tool that is free is Braille Blaster. If there are folks on here who are familiar with that, we've been working on the NIMAX side. We've been working very closely with the developer who is building out that functionality, and it's possible that it could be finished by the end of the fiscal year by October. But we're kind of hedging our bets a little on that one as well, and we're hoping for a target at least by the end of this calendar year. Um, in terms of the timeline for the BRF to eBraille converter, I'm personally really excited about APH field testing eBraille for the first time with students in the classroom. This fall, we will have about 300 or so students who are in grades. I believe it's grades 1 through 12. The pilot had begun with older students, but now it's expanded to all elementary and secondary students. And so we're going to be actually using that converter to create the eBraille to distribute to students to get their input, get their feedback. What do you like? Are there any hiccups? Are there any issues? And so I'm very much looking forward to seeing what kind of feedback we get. We are setting a target of October to begin that distribution of eBraille. And then it's also eBraille is now available as a format capability in the NIMAX. So if you're an AMP and you're wanting to put that as something that you work on eventually, you can log into your account and add it to your format capability list. And all of the authorized users will see that you're able to produce that. So in terms of reading eBraille, this is an area that we're still trying to build out some support and some traction with in terms of the different reading softwares. Monarch is the first multi-line display to support eBraille, and we do that through the Victor Reader app. And it's kind of an interesting thing because HumanWare works on the Victor Reader, but they're actually working with Dolphin Code. So we've been really trying to nudge Dolphin to say, hey, Dolphin, get eBraille support into your Easy Reader. We're also going to be releasing eBraille support in the APH, the Mantis. These are other APH humanware joint products that are out there on the market for the mantis and the chameleon. Um, and if you are really techie and you just want to mess around with it a little bit, you can technically access eBraille using a screen reader. If you uh, change the file extension to zip and unzip the file and then navigate to the index file and open it as an HTML file. If you are interested in that, feel free to ping offline and I'd be happy to kind of walk you through that. I don't know that it's not what I would want to do as a student, but we are hopeful that more displays will support eBraille over time. And we're working on that and kind of getting other vendors interested in providing that support. In terms of next steps and future directions, one of the things that's a focus for the developers and the spec folks is developing software to make reading eBraille files to make it easier with an older display. Some older displays, I think that there can sometimes be some issues with that. It's it's something that just has to be developed, and we want to try to get some excitement around that so that that can be available and start happening. And so that advocacy in terms of to hardware and software vendors is a really important piece, and especially for embossing. You know, that's an area where again we really want to make it possible for these files to successfully be embossed, but that's not something that we have lined up at this point. Um, there will also be, of course, you know, as we get folks out there using the format, there will be some refinement of the specification itself, just based on the feedback. We're also looking into the more complex formatting needs of music braille. We've heard that people are really excited at the idea of being able to read music on the Monarch, and so looking into how we could make eBraille work with music Braille that would be really cool. And then the last thing I wanted to highlight there is just that there are lots of folks who are interested in what we think of as dual rendition or multiple rendition files, which simply means that, you know, what if you wanted to be able to switch back and forth between Braille and print or Braille and audio, or have an audio overlay as synced with with your text. And so kind of looking at how we could integrate those into one eBraille package. So that's where we are with all of that. And with that, I think I lob it back over to Liz Schaller. So any last questions about eBraille before Liz takes us in a different direction?
Feel free to unmute too and ask your question out loud if you prefer, or you can put it in the chat. I know someone put the chat the link to the converter as it stands now, and I think that link will be where the new version is posted as well, Nicole, right? When it's available in the fall. That's what I'm thinking it will be the same link.
I'm thinking that it will be the same length. And I would
Yeah.
also say that I don't know. I don't think that they have they'd made some bug fixes, and I don't know that they refreshed the link with the most recent version. So if you're interested in testing it, give us a ping and we will make sure that you have the most recent version.
Hey, I'm going to post into the chat. It's also on the APH like shop, and I think they make updates to the GitHub link from there.
Perfect. Thank you, Stacy.
Yeah, thanks for that. So there is a question in the chat about eBraille and Math NIMAS. And basically the way that that works is that whatever the transcriber has done for the math, that's what's going to be in the eBraille file, right? So if you've done your translation and it's got Nimeth in it, your eBraille will have Nimeth. If you've done it in UEB technical, it will be in UEB. So basically, because when it comes down to the level of the Braille, that's what's in the Unicode, right? So it's not, yeah, like if you're thinking like it doesn't like retain the math ML. Like if you had a NIMAS file with MathML. If like what I'm thinking about is that you might be thinking, well, HTML can support MathML, and so are you retaining the MathML in the eBraille? And the answer to that, if that was your question, the answer to that is no. The translation would still be translating that MathML into the code that you've chosen. So does that answer your question?
I have a question that might piggyback on what David just asked. When we're talking about this eBraille, we're not talking about an on the fly from an XML NIMAS file being turned into eBraille. There is still some portion of a transcriber involvement that's changing it into accurate Braille and then being turned into eBraille.
Well, and here's the thing. I think that in terms of I think that there may be different tools. Like for example, with the converter is doing a very different thing, of course, than like Duxbury would do. But if you're like a Duxbury user and you're in there and you get your NIMAS file, you do your Braille translation, you do everything that you would do, that process is going to be identical to what you do now. The difference will be that when it comes time when you're done, you'll choose that export to eBraille. Now, I do think that probably there's going to be some finessing of that and evolution of the software over time because Liz and I were actually just having a conversation earlier today about there are things that you need for embossed braille that you don't need for eBraille, right? And so what about that? So I think that there's going to be kind of an iterative process in terms of getting to where we want to optimally be with the software. But I think out of the gate, it's going to be a minimal change for Braille transcribers. So, but thank you for asking about that. Okay, well, thanks everybody. And with that, I will hand it back over to Liz. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole. And Nicole is going to stick around. So if you think of questions during the rest of this, you can definitely bring them up during the Q&A as well. She will be here. I did want to spend just a few moments to highlight some other resources that are available on the NIMAC website, especially for our folks who aren't already NIMAC users. One is that if you happen to be an accessible media producer who does more than just producing Braille for students, we do have a training on how to convert NIMAS into large print using some templates and macros that were developed by the AT and AIM Center at Ocali. They have a recorded training on that, as well as all of the files. They have an extensive how-to user guide on implementation, but it seems to work similarly to how you would work if you like to use Swift or work in Word for your Braille process. It seems like it's not too far off to do the word process. And something that's really cool about the word process is it's highly customizable. The way they've built their templates, you can really make individualized selections for what your student needs and the output that you want. You can actually select if you'll be printing the book on 8.5 by 11 or a different size of paper, or if you want to format your final Word document to a certain screen size because your student's going to be using it on a computer or tablet. It's highly customizable, very accessible. So really recommend checking that out if you are someone that is producing large print for students as well. Additionally, there is a free EPUB conversion tool. We've talked a lot about EPUB today that is available through the DAISY Consortium. It's called the DAISY Pipeline 2, and it is absolutely free, and it is a quick and easy way to convert your NIMAS files, which in the conversion tool are called DT Book, into EPUB. On this first screen here, we have the link to download the most recent version of that tool. And then we do have a brief how-to video on how to utilize it. The interface might feel a little intimidating at first, but you really just have to make a couple of selections, and then the pipeline does process your files pretty quickly. Depending if it's a large textbook, it could take up to a couple of minutes, but we haven't had any issues with converting really large textbooks in the tool. And this is great if your student utilizes any kind of e-reader or web reader or anything like that. So again, it's quick and easy. If you have any issues at all or questions, please reach out to us and we're happy to assist you with getting started with that. And then finally, I wanted to mention our Duxbury user group for anyone here who doesn't currently participate. We have a quarterly virtual meeting set up that's led by Stacy. The meetings are typically 30 to 45 minutes focused on a specific topic, and we really encourage you to bring your questions or examples for a discussion. And so our next meeting is going to be Thursday, August 27th at 2 p.m. Eastern. And then our final meeting of the year will be Thursday, November 5th at 2 p.m. Eastern. Both of the links to register for those are in the chat. We'll also send out email reminders as well. And Stacy, since you lead those, is there anything you'd like to share about the user group?
So our next one in August, we're going to look at some of the keep codes that are available in Duxbury because instead of using things like new page or top, we can use the keep codes in order to keep things together, whether that be on a line or on a page. And it will facilitate down the road with the creation of eBraille as well, not having kind of like the new page. So I've just been told those kind of keep commands are beneficial, and I've been using them for a long time to not have to worry about entering new page if I've just got those keep codes. And I use it a lot with Nemeth to ensure that my Nemeth opening and closing stay on a line. So that's Thursday, August 27th. And if you guys have any great topics or things you want to know more about, you want somebody else to do some research so we can have a conversation, let us know. I'd love to do that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Stacy. Okay, with that, I'll hand it over to you. I know you have some more resources to highlight before we switch gears to our discussion.
Yeah, and thanks, Jim, for highlighting and saying what a great job training with Ocali was. That large print macro is amazing. If ever you need it, check that out. It is off the hook. All right, let's get into some resources. So what I did is I pulled a lot of all the resources from our previous sessions, and they're all contained in this PowerPoint. So you have them all together. So there's the NIMAC, our TGIL, the Tactile Graphic Image Library at APH. If you are looking for a graphic, check there first. You can if you need a baseline for something, there's some great ones. If you want to donate to the TGIL, please donate. We'd love to see what we can add to it. If you have ideas or requests, please go in there. It's a free login to get an account, and you don't get spam. You don't get emails. It's for you to go in and use it as a resource. We'd love for you to do more and interact with that. Lots of great stuff there. Braille Refreshers is an email that you can sign up for if you're not into the email. There's also an archive online. It is awesome. It gives you a great something to talk about with your friends and fellow Braille transcribers. Has a little bit of nuance to it. There's UEB Tech and Nemeth. It always highlights one small little component thing, but it kind of helps you get your mind out of your current project into something else. So that's always a nice tidbit to get in my box. The APH Access Academy and APH Hive are great places to go and get more information, get training. It's my understanding there is even some components that are there that somebody can get a CEU credit for. Is that true, Liz? Do you know?
Yeah, many of APH's webinars and much of the content in the Hive is available. You can get ACV REP credit for it. Yes.
Cool. Yeah, there's some great stuff, and I've really enjoyed taking some of that coursework and working through those. The National Braille Association Ask an Expert forum is really great for finding answers to unusual questions that you thought you were the only one that asked, but somebody else asked it before. If you are a member, you can go in there and ask and also view anything that's been posted. Then for our software resources that we've had Duxbury systems straight away. Then we've got the documentation link. So if you're not in Duxbury, hitting F1, you can search on it online. The NimPro 3.0 documentation, there's the link for that. Again, if you're not in the product, you can see all the information of that help file online. Swift as well. On that Swift website, not only can you download the free Swift add-in for Word, there is a great PDF of documentation for Swift. And last session, Paolo asked, how did I learn so many codes? That documentation has a ton of information that not only about how to use Swift, but how it interacts once it's in Duxbury. So you can learn a lot by reading that associated Swift documentation. It is not for the most current version, but it's still informative for where we're at. Notepad++, I'm gonna show that to you today. This is what I use. It's kind of like a Notepad, your basic Word thing that just shows you basic text. Notepad++ is the big sister, got the guns going. It has a lot of really great features. And that's what I use in conjunction because a BRF is actually a text file. And so I open those in Notepad++. And that's where I get a lot of the information like my page count. So when I finish a volume, I'm not going back and forth in my translated file in Duxbury. I'm actually looking at it in Notepad++. And if I need to grab my text for my tactile graphics, I'm grabbing it from Notepad++ of the BRF that's exported from Duxbury. We talked last time about the Unicode math chart. There's that PDF link again. So here are some transcriber resources. We've got ICEB, the International Council on English Braille. That's where you're going to get your definitive rules of EEB, including your guidelines for technical materials, along with the recently updated IPA Braille. Then we've got Braille formats online. That's just the direct link to go check out Braille formats. It's easy to use. That's where you can copy and paste all of those transcribers notes you need before a table, or you just don't know where a blank line's supposed to be. There's your resource for that. If you're looking for other code books and guidelines, there's just the general brailleauthority.org website. In conjunction with our code books are our instruction manuals that coincide with learning and getting our certification. Those are housed at NFB. And so we can see there's the link for Braille certification. At that link is where those lesson manuals are. And then inclusive publishing, I really like this website. It kind of keeps me like one step up. It kind of gives me information about what's happening in the publishing world, what kind of accessibility topics are surrounding there. And when it comes to MathML, I've kind of tapped into a few things at Inclusive Publishing. And so I really like checking them out and getting their newsletter. So I have a few toys and hardware things that I used for efficiency. I have some X key programmable keypads. I'll show you. I am on, when we do our demo, I guess I can show that a little bit more, but I will hold up one now, even though I'm a tiny face on the PowerPoint. They are separate sets of keys. This one's 128 keys. They come in 64. And then they also have a little 125, a little 24 one. So like this little 24 key matches a number pad. So you see these used in various other fields, like people may need it to go along with a point of sale system that's attached to a tablet. They'll have that for easily adding up things. My 128 I actually got used. It was used by a major sports network for golf tournaments. So you'll see that these are used in the video production side of things. So you can you can find them used, but that's the point of that conversation. But these are programmable, but you don't have to know programming. It's kind of like recording a macro in Word that you'd like to repeat. It has a little software interface, and you click a button and you type what you want. And if you want it to do something like this, you can add it in. Simple to use. And the really nice thing too is they run by software, where you have to have the software running on your computer, or by hardware where it writes it to the device. So if you're on your desktop and you've got your buttons and you decide that you need to go downstairs and get a new view and you're going to work on a laptop, you can unplug this and go plug it into your laptop, and it does exactly the same thing no matter where. Okay, a tour box. This thing, I'm going to disconnect it here. It's a type of input device, and it's kind of been designed for graphic artists doing, Photoshop, Illustrator, Corel Draw, Paint. All of these are different little buttons and knobs and twirly things and extra buttons. It does all sorts of fancy stuff, and each one of these are programmable to do whatever. My finger, I had the worst pain because I was constantly scrolling with my mouse when I was proofreading. Well, now I just scroll using that. So this was something that I added in for ergonomics, and then I had all sorts of other buttons that I could make do with whatever. So in Duxbury, when I click this button, it saves my file and then it translates it. When I press that button, it closes it. So I'm constantly just going back and forth between these buttons to save and translate. What did it come out as? Close, make my changes, make sure. I do the majority of all my work in Duxbury in the print file, which is why I like that aspect. Iris scanning technology. Okay, I don't know of other products like this. I am sure they exist, but in the back here, I have my book scanner. It's a book scanner, and it has a light that I got to turn on my laptop. I connected it over here so that you guys would be able to see it. So it has a light. It has a little scan button, or you can automatically just set it to scan. And what it does is it's reading both pages. And if you do it for auto scan, every like 3 seconds, you'll get a new scan. So you want to have your pink stuff, this sort wick stuff, instead of licking your fingers. You always saw the HR secretary going through all the paperwork with this. It's worth it. So you get this, and like every 3 seconds, it'll scan. It'll go boop, 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 boop. So if you found like for some reason some content isn't there for you, or you got something that's not an NIMAS file, that's a really great thing to use. A digital pen drawing device. This is mine, and I have it set up with an HDMI switch. So it mirrors what's on my main monitor. So the monitor I'm on here now is typically running Corel Draw. And then so we're going to freak it out so you can see this is mimicking exactly what I'm looking at right now. This is the pen. If you get one of these, when you're done with the pen, put it there. You'll hunt your desk forever trying to find your pen and only to find it underneath your keyboard, right? So, but what's nice is if you are in Corel, I see exactly, this is Corel Draw right now, and I can set it to be on F5, which is the free form, and I can draw free form on here the way that I want. And this is an example of some cells where I just had gone through and I had written on that. So that's the digital drawing device. Ergonomic mouse. This is my ergonomic mouse. We're used to seeing mice that look like this, and our hand goes on it like that. This is an ergonomic mouse that's upright. I had horrible pain from scrolling and clicking. this really made a big change. If they're funny looking, and I was like, I'm not going to use a funny looking mouse. And then I realized, oh, it feels so much better. I'm going to do that. And for a few dollars more, it has all sorts of little buttons. Again, programmable. I have it doing all sorts of things that I need to do. I have it copying and pasting what's selected, that kind of thing. One of the best investments I made. It saved my whole wrist and elbow and shoulder ache. And the final thing that I have on there is a mechanical keyboard. I always have, so you just saw I have multiple mice. I also have multiple keyboards. This is my emergency keyboard because I was going through keyboards every single year. You know, you're jamming out there. Well, the, the mechanical is kind of loud, but they hold up. And this one I've had for 4 years. And it also has some programmable buttons on the side. And I really like the 5 that I have on my side because I was getting really bad splaying problems from hitting that control button all the time to control S, control copy, control paste. So I made copy and paste one of those buttons so that I was stopping that splaying across my keyboard because I'm a right-hander running my mouse, and then my left hand, I'm doing most of my keyboard stuff when I'm doing tactile graphics. So that's why my left hand started having that splaying apart. So programmable buttons helped me with the pain of splaying, and then my ergonomic choices helped with the angle of my arm. And then there's some software resources. This auto hotkey, I just got it in the past month. It can be you can have it do automatic things. It has a massive learning curve. I'd say if you have any ounce of programming skill, this is easier for you to use. Otherwise, you're going to have to kind of search for some samples. So I found some samples and then kind of modified it for me. But what I did is I have it so that the transcriber's notes needed before like listed tables, once I put something in, it just puts all that text. So I found I'm not having to go copy and paste it in. So it's saving me like 20 seconds. But when I've got a book with 100 tables, I mean, how many, it adds up to minutes. And all of the ones that I do with that, this helped me recapture. And so my hourly rate is increasing because I'm not expending that time doing something that I can have the computer do. So auto hotkey is a really cool thing. Then CorelDRAW, that's what I use for my software. There are other packages and other things. That is the one that I like. Why do I like it? It was not what I was using. And when I started using it, I didn't want to use it. But then I was told tactile macros is what you need. You're not going to be able to do as much. So tactile macros is available from that PCR VI website. They have the most amazing video walkthrough of how to get tactile macros working in CorelDRAW. I love that website. Yes, I do have a subscription. I just downloaded 26.6, I think is what it was. I can't remember. But yes, it is working in the most recent download of CorelDRAW. Thanks for asking, Debbie. And then in last session, we learned about Scientific Notebook. And when this was one of those things that I really wanted years ago, but it's kind of a pricey piece of software. And then we learned last time you can get it for free. There's the documentation at the Duxbury website that has a link to the McKetchin website who was the original Scientific Notebook folks. So I installed 5.5 based on the information at the Duxbury website. And holy mackerel, if you save those files and then open them up in Duxbury, that is some beautiful math. All the codes are there. That was pretty off the hook. So yeah, I'm going to be using Scientific Notebook more. And then I do have math type as an integrated input in my Word. I use it more than I use the integrated Word editor. Okay, I said integrated too many times there. Math type as an add-in versus the integrated equation editor. That's the terminology right there. But I really like I really like math type for that component. Oh, Christina, I'm gonna be I'm there, but I am not at the near love that you have for it. I'm gonna be there soon. Okay, what do we have next?
Well, now
Oh,
I
demo
think,
time. Okay.
yeah.
What
So
do we
I'll
have
go.
any other questions or input from anyone?
Yeah, please put your questions in the chat. I'll go ahead and stop sharing so that
Right.
Stacy can get ready. We do have one question for you all that we're just interested in. And as we're thinking about other potential trainings for folks, we're curious about, in terms of tactile graphics, would you be interested in more training on creating tactile graphics from NIMAS images? Yes, absolutely. No, I feel confident in my current process. No, I don't need to create tactile graphics or other. Please let us know. Would you be interested in some tactile graphics training using NIMAS images? Okay. Well, quite nearly everyone says yes, absolutely. So we're very happy to hear that. And it is something we've already started talking about. So, keep an eye out on your email. We'll share more information about that.
I'm sure the no person is our tactile graphic artists that are in the.
Yeah,
All
probably
right,
so.
Teddy.
Probably so. Yeah,
Okay, I'm going to share my screen if we're good, or all right.
absolutely.
Um, let's make sure I'm sharing the right screen. Okay, do we see Duxbury floating on there? Perfect. I'm
Yes.
going to move your guys over here. First, this is the website. When you go to do Scientific Notebook, this is what this appears to be. And then the McKetchin software link is right there. And then for the Swift, it shows you can download the latest Swift, but then they have this documentation for Swift 5.7. It's the same as 5.2, but that link, fabulous. Okay, I had those up and I can check those off my list. Boom and boom. All right, let's take a look at Notepad++, the export of BRF from our Duxbury and how I use it for my tactile graphics. So this is the volume 1 we were working on for the textbook exemplar, and there were, you know what, let me pull up the PDF so we also see that. In here we had some, I'm scrolling up in the file, we had an example of a tactile graphic. And so what I have in my Duxbury file for page 9 is the title, tactile graphic. We'll make that a heading 1. Just because. And then I have a transcriber note that's just saying a web diagram. And then when I translate that out, this is what I get. F3 in order to tab down to save as type formatted Braille. And if you see, this is actually 15.1, which is an upcoming version with that eBraille possibility. Saving this as our BRF. Yes. Okay. I'm going to minimize Duxbury. I'm going to minimize my PDF and let's open up Corel Draw. So we saw me just working on that. And let's close that so I don't get confused here. All right, so here is the graphic of that web diagram. Oh, that's in the way. So here is my file structure on my computer of our session, and here is the BRF that I just made. And I already have this open in, you want to know what? I will demonstrate this separately. So let me reopen this So we can see that this is Notepad++, and all it is the BRF. It's 40 cells wide, 25 lines tall, and we can scroll and see this is the ASCII output of the Braille file. I brought back up our Braille, our DBT, because what I wanted to just demonstrate is if I made any change to Duxbury and I translate it and resave this out as my BRF, yes, I want to replace it because this is made the correction. And I'm back here looking at here. Once I click and return back to Notepad++, it asks me, this file has been modified by another program. Do you want to reload it? Yes. So any update that I make in my BRF, I can easily have it constantly updated here in Notepad++. I'm going to zoom out on this BRF so we can see that this is print page 9, Braille page 17. The other cool thing is that Notepad++ will do these macros. You can just record a macro. So you can start recording. When you're done, stop it, rename it, and assign it a keyboard shortcut. So here, I actually recorded one, copy for tactile graphics, and I assigned it the Control-Shift-A. And what I did is I hit start recording, and my mouse cursor was at the end of my Braille page number. And then I just held Shift and went up 25 lines. And then you can see it actually goes up to the end. I actually only want the text for this, so I went over 2, which brought me to the beginning of the line, and then that FF, which is kind of like the form feed code for the new page, I right-clicked over. That is what I would record. I can stop my macro here, and then I can assign it a keyboard shortcut. And I have it assigned to one of the buttons that's on my mouse. So whenever I come here, I can just put my cursor down there and click a button, and it automatically is assigned. That button on my mouse is assigned to do Control-Shift-A, which is the keyboard shortcut for copy for tactile graphics. So I click my one mouse button to get that text copied in. And then here I am in CorelDRAW, and my template, every page of my template, I want to have a full text block. This text block is 40 cells wide, and it's a little bit longer than 25 cells. The reason being, if you come across a producer or anyone who requests a version 19 or earlier file from Corel, for some reason, it will get cut off if you make this this paragraph block exactly 25. So all of mine are just a wee bit bigger just to accommodate those early save as. Coming back to what I have on my clipboard from using my mouse and copying from Notepad++, I can come into this text block. And I always have it say text, so it's not just a floating empty block, because then I'll forget that it's there and I'll end up with multiple blocks. I just select all and then I paste it in. And so now the exact formatting that I made in Duxbury is exactly laid out for my tactile graphic. And then I can adjust my tactile graphic as need be. And I'm missing one of my labels here. Okay, are there any questions about using Notepad++ and Corel in what I just showed?
I am not seeing any questions in the chat, but please do. This is, our discussion portion. Feel free to unmute and ask questions as well if you have them.
So one thing that I definitely want to get out there is I like to do all the graphics. Like I'll just have a graphics day and I'll just start going through and making graphics through a whole, however, until I get bored or I'm just spent for the day. And then I'm ready to do it into the Braille. I want to let you know so you don't make this mistake, and I may have said it before, but it's worth repeating. Corel will overwrite existing extensions. To demonstrate, if I were to save this And I always, all my files have the same name. They just have different extensions, right? If I went down here and I have a Corel file, but I save it like this and I accidentally say I want it to be a DXP or I want it to be a BRF, that's what Corel will save it as. It won't put CDR on the end of that. And so when you go to look for that huge, all of those graphics that you just made, you cannot find a CDR file. It may have overwritten as an existing file extension. So I had done that for an entire day's worth of tactile graphics. I overwrote it as a DXP file.
Oh no.
Yeah. So it also brings to the point that if you're using something like on your Mac or your Windows and you have like OneDrive Cloud, or what is it called on a Mac? I don't know. It was something, it had the big deep thing looking. I can see it in my mind from years ago. I can't remember what it's called. But at least you might be able to go and like bring that file back from your history. But please, when you are working in Corel, ensure that your file names are just the file name itself, and let it then append its own CDR, because if you have it as something else, it won't append it properly. Okay, that's the big note that's in all caps and bold that was on my note. The other thing that I wanted to talk about with Notepad++ is the fact that I will keep this up right next to where I'm at. So I will go and I will see, okay, here's my end of volume. Right here, there's my Braille page numbers and my print page numbers. I will open up and have, so oops, let me bring that back up. I'll move it to the right. So I have Duxbury back. What I'll do is I'll come back up to the top, and here on my title page, I'm ready to go. There's 31 Braille pages and it's on B17. And then I'm not going and scrolling back and forth in that file. Coming back to Notepad++, I can even scroll through and see, oh, here's all my T files. Here's my T pages, not files, pages. T6, great, T6, boom. How many P pages do I have here? Here's P4. Oh, and now I'm on Braille page 1, great. So I've got 4 P pages. Oh, I'm going, I have A, here's my 8 in Roman numerals, and then print page 1. So now that makes it easy to put it in. So that's also how I get all that information. I also use Notepad++ if I am moving figures or moving tables. I always put like a couple of X's. This table's moved to print page XX306. Table moved from print page 307. Well, then I can search for XX300, 3 to find that. And then before I send off the volume, I can verify, and in Notepad++, I see the exact page where that table ended up being moved, and I can influence it I can make that adjustment in my Braille file. That's a check mark. Any questions?
David did say that DBT does the same thing with file extensions, I guess, if you're not careful. So maybe
Oh,
he's learned that the hard way.
darn.
Yeah.
I haven't learned that one the hard way. I'm sorry you had to learn it through that one. That's really unfortunate. Oh, I have an example for cap break. So do we have more? Y'all ask your questions. Well,
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions or anything that you'd like to see Stacy demo for you at the rest of our time?
well, while you're putting that together, I wanted to show you, this was an example I came across, and I've actually come across this a few times. This says figure 17-6, a all caps CSI using casting materials. Okay, so I did the forensic science book. And when we translate this, we can see that the capitals terminator happens after CSI. And this is really not appropriate because figure 17-6 is actually a title. And then ACSI should be separated from that. And so I wanted to show you two things. One, here is the style. There is a style called cap break. So when you enter that, you get to see that upon translation, we have a word indicator on figure, and then the cap single on A, and then cap word on CSI. So that makes a little bit more sense for our reader, knowing that's a heading versus just this big conglomeration. I also wanted to show, again, document, modify style. Even if you're not going to modify it, how do we know what is going behind the scenes in Duxbury that's making cap break as a style work? Here in the style to modify cap break, it shows you, here's the beginning code of it, here's the ending code, and we can see that cap break is just the cap break style has one code, which is XCS. Awesome. I'm not going to modify anything, so I'm canceling. But let's put that code in, XCS. Oh, backwards. So I deleted the style, and now I just entered the code, and we get the exact same thing. So that's another way that if you're trying to learn codes and you know there's a style doing what you want it to do, what is it? Way to learn more codes.
That's a really good tip.
Okay.
Anything else? Feel free to unmute if you have a question. We'd also love to hear from folks, whether or not you've been to all 6 sessions or just a few. What's something that you're taking away from this that you're excited to try out in your own work? We'd love to hear from you about that as well.
Yes.
Please let us know.
While you guys are putting that in, I just wanted to tell you all that the work you do is appreciated. And I hope you appreciate yourselves as much as we appreciate you for attending and for doing the transcription work. And when you're doing it, stand up. Do a little movement. Remember, you're a people. Be kind to yourself. What time is it? Have you been sitting for an hour and a half and not realized that you have just been transcribing away?
Oh yeah, I can definitely see how that could happen.
Yeah. The investment in a standing desk, that could be so helpful.
Absolutely.
Oh, yay. Awesome. Thanks, Ray. Appreciate that.
Stacy, I have a question regarding the scanner. Hi, Liz. Hi,
Hi,
Stacy.
Hi.
Hi. So with the scanner, how well does it correct? Like if you have a thick book and it's skewed when you take capture a picture of it, does it correct it pretty well?
Yeah, so I don't have it connected to my desktop because I always use this with my laptop because it needs kind of the space. And for each page, you can actually go and adjust the corners, and it'll remember that throughout a whole book. It also automatically skews for this fold in the middle. And
Right.
like one book I did that was absolutely not transcription related is we had a friend who passed away, and in their cookbook collection was the book Joys of Jello. All the jellos that were made of lemon and lime with green beans and peas and onions. And this was so worthwhile to capture some of those recipes. And it was so nice because it automatically did not detect the holes in the spiral. You can space it out and say, I don't want that gutter. So that was a great
Right.
example. And this one, I will tell you, is old. I bought it
Mm.
old. And I want to remind everyone, it's kind of a holiday coming up and there's lots of sales going on. I bought this when a new version came out. I got that dirt cheap because it was the old version. And man, is it a workhorse. I can't imagine what the new ones are doing. If this one is performed as well for me, new ones are probably even better.
Right. Right. And the OCR on it is pretty good, right? It's the Iris or the IRIS or something
It
like that.
So Iris is a Canon company, and it came with OCR software, and it does a
It does a good
really
job.
remarkable job. Not so great in math equations, but at least
Hmm.
I've got a scan of some math equations. If I've got like a handout that a teacher just gave me. Like I worked for 5 years in a district, and so sometimes just getting that weird scaly print from a teacher on the
Oh
end of the
yeah,
day, like,
you
hey,
get
I need this tomorrow. So yeah, it works fine for that.
And do you prefer using the PDF software that comes with that over the Adobe by chance, or are there any differences that you've seen?
Okay, I use only Adobe Acrobat Reader. I don't even think it's called Acrobat. I just the PDF
Like your
reader. I don't have anything beyond just that reader. And so I use whatever. This has like a desktop software that assembles things and then outports it to a folder. And then from that folder is where I just take it. And that's the PDF. Whatever it set out, that's what I work with. And like I'm sure if I wanted to buy, I think this one's, I think version 7 is out. I think that might be a 4, and
Mhm.
it still does a great job. So I am sure it's even better.
We might have talked about this, or we've done it in earlier sessions, but you know how when you scan a document, or you get a you can scan a document, and it's you save it as a PDF, or when you transfer it to a Word document, each line after each line there's like a paragraph marker, or an enter. How do you usually deal with that?
Okay, so this is my this is my 64 key, and this button down here is programmed to go to the end of the line,
Uh-huh.
put a space, and delete. So I actually click this over and over and over again.
Okay.
If someone else
Yeah.
has some better ideas on how to do that, I am all over it. That's just how I've done it.
Yeah. No, that's good. It seems like I'm always just in the experimental phase of everything stage. When I'm doing my work, it's like it's just I try one software program, and it works and it's great, but it's always I feel like I'm experimenting as opposed to staying to one thing, but it works out at the end. Oh, it always does, but
That you're talking about something that can be a challenge and occasionally can be a frustration, that you're wanting to find a solution to something, and you keep trying various things. And so my adjustment to that thought, I felt that way, and I felt frustration. I was starting to have it eat away from me. So I shifted my thought pattern. I was like, I'm putting on my lab coat. I'm going to make this fun. I am no longer trying to find the solution and getting frustrating. Now I'm going to try everything and see what it does for me, and then come and get to where I need, which is one reason that I ended up coming across like these X keys. Like, who would have thought that I would have found these buttons while I was looking
mm,
at oddball things for video editing?
right.
So
Yeah.
I
Just
feel for you, and I hope that as you find great solutions, you share it with us.
okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for that.
Like someone mentioned in the chat a couple of tools that have output that might avoid the paragraphing problem that you mentioned as well. So there you go, Paulo, a new thing to try. How about that? Another
Yeah.
new thing to try.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm gonna definitely copy and paste those tips. Thank you.
Yeah. I also wanted to, while we wait for anybody, jump in. I will stop talking when you have something that you want to say. I wanted to show a couple of things in Word that I use at the end of my volumes. And like I said, BRFs are they're text files. They just have the BRF extension because they're 24 by 40 or whatever parameters for your embosser that has been set at. And I wanted to show you one thing that I do before I send off a file. Okay, let me put this over here. I will, with my BRF selected, I will open with, and I will choose another app, and I will choose Word. And I will only do it once. I prefer doing this than opening it in Word. I just always am working in my files. So there you go. A new way to do it. And this is what it'll kind of look at. Let's make it big screen. I have no idea why mine always has this right aligned. I've seen other people do this with Word and it's working just fine. I always have to select all and put it to the left. So ignore that part because it might not look like that with yours. But I have two errors I am making all the time is that I will put a space like when I use the transcriber note style in Duxbury, I will put a space either at the beginning or a lot of the times right at the end. And if you want to make a proofreader angry, send off a volume that they've cited that and then send them another volume with like, yet again, there's a space before the ending transcriber's note. You can just like hear the little chirpiness when you read that on the keeping proofreaders happy is the goal. Okay. So in here, it's one of these using wild cards. And the slashes, the @ sign has to be slashed out. That backslash, that's the key above the enter, has to be before the @ symbol. So what it also needs to be put before the opening, the less than sign. I guess that's the angle bracket is what that's called. And then it also has that slash has to be done at the greater than or the closing angle bracket. But what I'm looking for here is the ASCII of the opening transcriber's note character, which is the @ symbol dot close less than sign, and then the @ dot greater than sign. And then in the middle for the wild card, I have in parentheses the asterisk, which is find everything in between this and that. So find everything before the opening and opening for the closing. And in the replace with, I choose highlight, and I choose highlight from that format font. No, it's sorry, that's not it. It's format highlight. It's its own special little thing right there, highlight. And it toggles. And before you enter find and replace, if you change your highlight here, and let's make it hot pink, let's just say we change it without selecting text, that's the highlight that it'll actually use. So anyway, I want to replace all. And yes, let's take a look at it. What this does is it finds every instance where there is an opening transcriber's note and a closing transcriber's note. So this is my special symbols page, but I can go through and just cycle through and ensure that every single instance has a closing one, because I'm also one that if I use the codes, I might not put the TNE, like, oh, I'm just typing along 7.5, oh, here's my transcriber's note, and then I forget the closing one. Like in a key for a tactile graphic, I'll forget to do that after the last item in a key. That's on my personal notes, like, hey, check for these things. So this is one aspect where I look for the transcriber's note things. So I will make these big. So this first one here, let's make it super big so y'all can see it. This one is what's found for the transcriber's notes. And then this one finds opening and closing Nemeth code indicators. So that underscore and the parentheses and the colon, I had to backslash out to use them in wildcards. But I really find those to be beneficial for proofreading.
Thank you so much, Stacy. And we only have a few moments left, so I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat. I will go ahead and share my screen here and put up our exit
Thank you.
survey QR code, and Alexa will also put that link in the chat as well. This is an exit survey that's for our whole series. So there will be some questions about evaluating the series as a whole. And then also we really want to hear from you about what kind of additional trainings and resources that you need as transcribers to do your job to work with NIMAS files. So please do take a few minutes to fill out the survey. We really appreciate your feedback. It helps us in our reporting to the department, and it helps us to develop our additional resources and trainings and programs. So we really, really appreciate it.
Thank you everyone for joining these. I appreciate you attending and participating. It's really been great.
Yeah, it's been so much fun. I've learned so much.
Well, thanks to the NIMAC and to all of you for hosting it. It's been wonderful working with you and doing this.
Yeah, thank you all so much. Okay.
I
With
wanted to
that,
thank you guys too for everything that you taught us. I think everything, the NIMAS instruction was all great. I thought it was great.
Thank you, Jane. It's good to meet
Yeah.
you on here.
Yeah, it's nice meeting you too, Liz. Or Stacy, sorry. I can remember.
It's all right.
yeah, thank
Oh
you.
gosh. Thank you.
We got a lot of thank yous in the chat. Oh, try a little
Ah, yeah.
Zumba. There you go. Perfect. Okay. With
I
that,
like
I
the
will
Zumba.
go ahead and stop our session 6 recording.